Hi, I'm Terry Compton, the Diabetes Education Program Manager here at St. Tammany Parish Hospital. I'm here today to do an overview of the 3 primary insulin pumps that you may have an opportunity to see if patients come into the hospital so that you can assist them in caring for their diabetes. I do have a person that's going to also be involved with doing some of the hands-on demonstration so that you'll have an opportunity to see how some of the different pumps work. I'm going to talk first about the Insulet company's Omnipod system. And what I have for you to see today are the 3 systems that they currently have on the market. They have what they call a Classic, which is the original Omnipod. They have the Omnipod Dash system, and then they have the Omnipod 5 system. The reason I just wanted to make sure that you know that each of them require their own type of what we call a pod, which the pod itself is the device that's going to be worn on the body. But inside of the container here, it has a syringe with a needle that's going to be used to draw up the insulin to fill the pod with each device. The pods are not interchangeable. They are specific to their type of device. So a person that has an Omnipod 5 has to use an Omnipod 5 pod versus they could not use one that's called a Classic. Out of these 3 systems, the one that's integrated with a continuous glucose sensor is the Omnipod 5. And as you can see, it comes with a receiver, or if the person has an Android phone, they may have the app actually on their phone so that they're able to use it remotely or with their receiver or with their phone device. And as you can see, the sensor that's compatible with the Omnipod 5 is the Dexcom G6 sensor, which has a transmitter that's not disposable, and then a sensor device that the patient wears. And this is just happens to be the applicator to insert the actual sensor itself. I just wanted to give a brief overview as well that there are some glucose sensors that are on the market. These are standalone, that patients may use these independently of using an insulin pump. There is what they call the Libre 2, there's a Libre 3, and there's also the Dexcom G7. So a patient, if they say I have a sensor, you need to make sure that the sensor happens to be a G6 that's going to be compatible with a pump that they're using. Otherwise, the other sensors are going to be independent and giving those glucoses to the patient separate and not being integrated to the insulin pump device. I'd like to introduce you to my friend Sarah. She's a person that lives with type 1 diabetes and uses the Insulin Omnipod automated system. So with her receiver, she just deactivated her pod because there can be only one pod that the receiver can be connected to at one time. So she's going to actually remove the pod that she's currently wearing from her belly, clean her skin with an alcohol prep, she's going to go into her controller to go through the next steps to actually fill the pod. And as she's removing the pod from the tray, there is a syringe and a needle that she has to connect to be able to draw up the insulin from the vial. And I recommend putting the pod back in the tray just so it makes it simpler to be able to insert the insulin in there without it tipping. She's got room temperature insulin, and her syringe can hold up to 200 units. And it's going to be U100, either Aspart or Lispro insulin. She's actually going to, with the U100 insulin, up to 200 units. And when the pod has enough insulin to know that it's able to be used, you'll get the 2 confirmation beeps. She's continuing to fill the pod with the insulin at this time. Next, she's going to go through the steps to get it to connect. And the pod and the device, either her phone or the receiver, has to be next to each other so that they can communicate. Once they're communicating, there should be some clicks that the pod will make as it's priming the internal parts. And once it's finished doing its priming, it'll give her a confirmation to be able to continue with the next steps to the application. Now she's going to be putting it back in a similar area that she had it, but she's going to be facing the pod in the opposite direction so that the cannula is going to be in a different site. Once it has the confirmation that it's completed the prime, it will prompt her to actually insert the infusion set. Now you'll see that there's a tab that has to be removed. She has to forcefully kind of pull it back. And then she's going to look to see whether that cannula has been displaced or not, which we do not want it to be displaced. She's going to pull up the tabs to get the adhesive. And if you're placing it on the abdomen, which is an option, then she's going to place it side to side. She's running her fingers around the adhesive just to make sure it's intact. And then she's going to go through the steps to actually have the cannula be inserted. And then what the prompts on the screen is going to ask, just does she see a pink area right there? She's pointing to it right there. That knows that the cannula has been discharged. And then it's going to ask her again, does she see the pink confirmation on the back? If she does, she says yes. Mm-hmm. And then she's going to actually start the infusion. Now, the other thing I just wanted her to show is where she's wearing her Dexcom. She's got her sensor on, which is also on her abdomen. And the only thing is just that patients need to have the Omnipod and the Dexcom in what we call line of sight so that they can be Bluetooth and see each other with that. If she happened to have it on one device on the back of her left arm and the other device on her right area of her abdomen, it may or may not connect. So line of sight can be left arm, left abdomen, right arm, right abdomen, 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 hip, or hip. So I wanted to make a few points again about the Insulin Omnipod systems. With the Dash, this system most likely you're going to see with patients who have type 2 diabetes. So just so you're aware that there is a receiver that the patient has to have. This also has to be charged just like a phone. So if the receiver doesn't have the charge, then the receiver won't be able to, the patient won't be able to activate the system information. Just so that you know that even if the receiver was lost, the pod still gives insulin continuously through what we call their basal delivery. However, they're not able to give a bolus or insulin for food at the time of the meal. This system, the classic symptom, is going to be discontinued sometime in 2024, so you may or may not see patients with this system much longer. And what we're going to have also on Lifeline, as well as in the binders that are on the floor, we're going to have some resource material for each of the insulin pumps that are going to be demonstrated today, so that you'll have a quick view with some pictures, just with some of the menu information, so that you'll have a basic understanding if you're assisting a patient or observing a patient doing a pump change for themselves. One important point to remember is that the pod, again, holds 200 units of insulin. The pod's either going to expire by the volume of insulin that's in the pump or by 72 hours. So if the patient runs out of insulin before the 72 hours, they would need to change it in that less time. So the patient can see how much insulin is actually on their device, what's left in the pods, and their expiration date when the pod expires, and for them to have to change the pod. The next pump I'm going to be demonstrating is called the Tandem T-Slim. The technology part of this is that there's two components, either with the basal IQ technology or the control IQ technology. The only difference in the pumps themselves is the software update for the pump to have different functions. My goal for you here is to see all of the pieces and the parts that are required for this pump to be able to be used. One of the most important things is that this pump is charged, so that the patient has to come with a cord and an adapter to be able to plug it in to the side of the pump. if the pump runs out of the battery, then the pump won't function. So that's a very important thing. There's no internal battery. There is an internal battery, but there's no replaceable battery. There's also a couple other components. There's a cartridge that the patient has to be able to fill the insulin. And this is the syringe that's specific to filling this particular cartridge. It can hold up to 300 units to be able to fill. And then there's different types of infusion sets that I just happen to have. There's what we call a universal luer lock that will connect to the piece of the cartridge, just so that you're aware that these two pieces are going to have to connect. So when we're looking at the two pieces, this is going to actually end up connecting here. So what I'm going to do is actually just demonstrate filling the cartridge, just so that people have an understanding of what the process is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is demonstrate how a person would actually fill their cartridge. So this is the disposable part of the pump in the back where the cartridge has to come off. So this would be an old cartridge. And this would be the new cartridge. It has its own syringe with their needle that will connect. And this happens to be a bottle of saline, just to represent a bottle of insulin. And each line, that's 100 units, 200, up to 300 units. I'm just going to pull back to the 200 line. Okay. The thing that's unique about this particular cartridge is that there's what we call a balloon that's inside of this cartridge. We actually have to remove the air from this cartridge before we can fill it with insulin. And this is a little tricky technique that most patients may or may not be aware of, but just so that there's a little internal dome that we have to put this needle into the center. And when we place it in, it's only going to go so far in terms of just meeting that part. And we're going to retract and pull air out of the cartridge. Pull it back out. Do it one more time. Pull the air out of the cartridge. You can see the bubbles as they're coming out of the cartridge. And then we'll fill the cartridge with that insulin. Okay, so now the cartridge is filled with 200 units of insulin. When we go back on the face of the pump, to unlock the pump, there's a 1, 2, 3. And then on the screen, there's going to be some options that tell us where we want to go. And I have to do where it says load. And it talks about changing the cartridge. And it actually talks me to change cartridge. It says in order to change a cartridge, all insulin deliveries will be stopped. So there's a confirmation. So it's actually stopping. It says make sure that the infusion set is disconnected from your body. Are you ready to continue? And so what we're going to do, it says preparing cartridge, and it wants us to actually place this cartridge into there. There's a little glide bar on the side so that this will slide in very smoothly and it should snap in place. And then it says remove the cartridge and install a filled cartridge, then tap the unlock button to complete the process. and it says, is the cartridge installed? And I'm confirming. So now it's detecting a new cartridge. So now it says cartridge has been changed, and on here it says make sure that the set's discontinued from your body and securely connect the tubing to your cartridge. On the next screen you will be able to fill the tubing. So I actually have two different infusion sets, but what I just wanted to show you this with this one specific one that I have, it can have a cannula, or it could actually have a steel needle. And this particular one happens to be a steel needle that I'm going to connect the pieces and the parts here. And I'm going to take this lure lock and I'm going to connect it to this pigtail. The important thing about connecting that is that once this is connected, we never disconnect the insulin pump at this site. If we ever have to disconnect from the patient at the site, we would do it at the infusion set. So this one actually has here where you would disconnect from here. This happens to be the infusion set, and this just has to be a support anchor that does relieve some of the tension off of the infusion set. So again, we always disconnect at the infusion set, not at the pigtail here. So now it's asking us to go to fill the tubing because we have to prime the tubing with insulin. So we're going to start. Depending on the length of the tubing, it may require a little bit more amount of insulin, but typically with the traditional tubing length, it's about 10 units. So it won't let you go through the process any sooner until at least 10 units of insulin has been primed. And our goal is that we want to see some drops of insulin come out the tip of the tubing. The patient that you're working with should be able to do this independently. You're just there to observe the process with the patient. Now we can see that there's a drop of fluid that's coming out. So we'll just accept a couple drops and then we'll just stop it. And what it's now going to do is go through its detection that it's finished the priming, and it's going to prompt us again to ask us, did we see drops come out the end? It says here, if you see drops at the end of the tubing, press done. If no insulin, then press fill again to complete that. And it showed that it took about 13 units to fill the tubing. So the last part of the process is either to fill the cannula or to just complete the process. Because this is a steel needle, we don't actually have to fill the cannula because the insulin's to the tip. If it was a Teflon cannula and the needle is inserted and then removed, there's a little dead space in that cannula that we would have to fill the tubing depending on the type. Then there's a certain amount that would be used, anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5 units of insulin. I'm just going to show about placing this on a little skin, and we're just basically, it's like putting a button on. You just press it in, run your finger around, and then we can put the adhesive to be an anchor for the other infusion set, just so we are securing it. Again, these can be placed on the abdomen, the arms, the legs, the hips. So what we're going to do is we're going to just site reminder, 3 days. And the last thing that we have to do, there's a confirmation box at the top. We press that. It reminds the person to check their blood sugar in 1 to 2 hours. And we're going to resume the insulin. And this is the best part. It gives you a confirmation splash that the insulin has been resumed. I'm going to talk next about the Medtronic systems that are made by Medtronic MiniMed. There are quite a few pumps on the market with Medtronic. There's a 670, 770, and their latest one is called the 780G. That's what I have actually available here. This one is integrated with their Guardian G4 sensor so that it's augmented and drives the delivery of the basal delivery of the pump. The thing that's important to know about these pumps is that it requires a AA battery, and this particular pump is picture driven. We do have a detailed menu map that will be available on Lifeline as well as in the binders, so that way if you have a question about what the person is doing, you can actually review that with that. So when we get ready to go into the pump, I'm just pressing a button to activate it. I'm taking the arrow to the side where it says reservoir and set, and it gives me some options. It says new reservoir and set. So what I'm going to actually do is just fill a reservoir and put it through there to do the priming. So they have a proprietary infusion set and reservoir, so it's only specific to Medtronic. There's the adapter piece that's going to go into the vial of insulin, and there's also a plunger that's going to be removed. What we do recommend is that the person kind of cycles the infusion set, just because there's a lubricant and it makes it much easier for it to work. So if I put it in, draw it about to 200, place it over the vial, push the air in, invert the vial, and I'm going to draw the insulin into the reservoir. I'm going to remove the vial, remove the adapter piece, and the plunger. And I did not get all of the air out, so I actually have to put it back together to be able to displace the air. I have to connect it back. What you don't want is to have air in the cartridge. So now I actually have a cartridge that's filled with insulin. When I go back, remove the reservoir from the pump and then press rewind. And what it's allowing is that the piston rod that's inside of the machine is rewinding. And it says to fill the new reservoir, connect tubing to the reservoir and do not connect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the infusion set and I'm going to connect these two pieces together and make sure they're secure. When you do, they'll turn in place. I'm going to drop it in to the pump itself and turn it till it locks again. You'll see that it's going to the side. Next, it's asking me to place a reservoir in the pump. Do not connect to body. Press next. It wants me to load. And now what's happening is that motor, that piston rod, is connecting to the back of the cartridge. And once it connects, then it's going to actually start priming the tubing. And as you see, I'm holding down, and did we see drops come out? I can show you how to insert one of the devices. There's some adhesive that comes off to expose. That's going to go on the body. You place it on the skin, you pull the tab. You press the button, it inserts the infusion set, and then it's on the skin. And then we would connect the tubing to that. And it's asking, the last part is to fill the cannula. Since the cannula is under the skin and the needle is out, it's actually filling that cannula with insulin. It says delivery resumed successfully, and so now the person is actually getting their basal rate of their infusion. With the Medtronic insulin pumps, with the 780 system, the newest sensor that they are using is the Guardian 4, which does not require finger sticks for calibration, whereas their Guardian 3, which is used with their other pumps, do require calibration and a finger stick. So the patient would have to come in with a sensor device. This is the insertion device. They have to come in with their transmitter, and they have to come in with a charger for their transmitter. So this is going to actually connect to the actual sensor that will then be placed on the body. So they have to have a charger for their transmitter, and they have to have the actual sensor that matches to their insulin pump. So in closure regarding this presentation, I wanted you to be aware that if you're looking for information, each of the pump systems have a history. So if we're making the decision that the patient is not to continue on their pump and you're wanting to know about how much insulin each of the patients have, each of these pumps have a history option that allows you to go into that information to look at how much insulin that patient is currently taking for basal. And then that way you can kind of get that as an overview for how much insulin they may require for basal insulin. Just so when we go back to any of the pumps, there is some lockout features. Just with the receiver for the Omnipod 5, there is a 4-digit security code that this person has entered. So for us to be able to actually access the receiver, the person would have to give you their code to be able to swipe in or go into the receiver. And then it allows us to go into the menu with information that we're looking at. So again, everything on this one is a touch screen, so it allows you to kind of find information. And here's this history. So we're able to look at what her requirements are that's in the pump. Again, with this one, always the center button turns on the pump or opens it up. And if you press it again, it comes up to the menu. So then you're able to see information to find what you're looking for. Again, with the menu settings, you'll be able to find that history. And then with this pump, when we turn it on, there's a tap of a 1, 2, 3, that's universal to all, to be able to open up the pump before you can actually go into any of the information. So there's no delivery of insulin just by touching the screens or touching the pumps. It does require some sort of action to get into the pump itself. With a patient having an insulin pump here in the hospital, it does require a physician's order. And within that order, there's a consult to diabetes education. So let us assist you in terms of helping you put in the pump parameters that are required for the patient to use the pump. And we'll be glad to explain the system itself as well as the requirements for pump management here in the hospital.